My name is Anders, and I was 22 years old when my father locked me outside on Christmas Eve, a night that was supposed to be filled with warmth, laughter, and the comforting glow of family, but instead became the coldest, loneliest, and most defining moment of my entire life, the kind of moment that changes you forever. Because the temperature had dropped to -12 degrees, the kind of cold that slices through your skin and settles into your bones, where every breath feels like inhaling needles and every exhale turns into a ghostly cloud that disappears too quickly. And snow fell endlessly from a dull gray sky, covering everything in a thick white blanket that looked beautiful from a distance but felt brutal up close. And I remember the exact second the door slammed behind me. The sound loud, final, and heavy, like more than just wood and metal had shut me out. Like something inside my heart had been sealed off forever. And my father's words echoed in my head, cold and absolute, telling me to stay outside until I learned respect. And at first I stood there frozen in disbelief, staring at the door, waiting for it to open again, waiting for him to change his mind, waiting for my mother to step in and stop him. Because surely this was just another one of his dramatic threats, another tactic to scare me into apologizing. But then I heard the lock click, a soft, almost gentle sound that somehow felt more devastating than the slam itself. And in that moment, reality crashed down on me harder than the freezing wind. Because only minutes earlier we had been sitting around the dinner table pretending to be a perfect family, the Christmas lights glowing warmly, reflecting off polished plates, silverware neatly arranged, decorations carefully placed like something straight out of a holiday commercial. Everything staged to look perfect, but beneath that polished surface tension had always lived in our house. Quiet and constant, like an invisible weight pressing down on everyone. And my father had been in one of his moods that night, delivering his usual cutting remarks disguised as advice, criticizing the way I spoke, the way I carried myself, the way I laughed, the way I existed, and I had endured it for years, swallowing my frustration, nodding politely, shrinking myself to keep the peace, because I had learned that silence was safer than honesty. But that night exhaustion overcame fear, and when he made another comment about my attitude, I calmly defended myself, not with shouting, not with insults, just with a simple boundary, a sentence that felt reasonable to me but felt like rebellion to him. And I watched the warmth drain from his face instantly, like someone had flipped a switch, the room growing tense, every movement suddenly louder. My mother lowering her eyes to her plate like she always did when conflict approached, retreating into silence, my father's chair scraping violently against the floor as he stood, his presence filling the room with that familiar suffocating authority. And before I could even process what was happening, he grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the front door, my protests drowned by his anger, my explanations meaningless, the door opening with a rush of icy wind that stole my breath. And then I was outside. No coat, no boots, just shock and cold. And the words he said next replayed in my mind all night as he told me to stay outside until I learned respect. And at first I knocked, my heart pounding, embarrassment mixing with disbelief, promising apologies I didn't even understand. But no one answered, the house remaining silent, glowing with warmth I was no longer allowed to share. And eventually desperation turned into numb resignation as my fingers began to ache, then burn, then lose sensation entirely. Snow gathering on my shoulders, my hair, my eyelashes, time blurring into something cruel and distorted, and searching for any connection to the world I had been expelled from. I walked toward the side window where the curtains never fully closed, and through that small gap I watched them open presents and laugh. My father smiling as if nothing had happened, my mother moving mechanically, the Christmas tree lights flickering behind them, making the warmth inside feel like a different universe. And I felt invisible, erased, like an outsider watching a life that continued perfectly fine without me. And the cold started to invade deeper, no longer just discomfort but something frightening. My teeth chattering uncontrollably, my legs trembling, my thoughts slowing into a dangerous calm, memories surfacing of childhood moments where I learned that respect meant silence and obedience, where I learned to walk on eggshells, where I learned that love was conditional. And I wondered how many years I had spent trying to be enough for someone who would never see me as enough. And just as my mind started slipping into that numb fog, headlights cut through the darkness, the sound of tires crunching over snow breaking the silence, and a long black limousine rolled into the driveway, sleek and elegant, completely out of place in our quiet neighborhood. And for a moment I thought the cold had made me hallucinate. Because people like that didn't visit our house, and the vehicle stopped smoothly. The driver's door opened, then the back door, and my grandmother stepped out, wrapped in a pristine coat, posture straight, presence commanding even in the storm, looking like someone who belonged to a world of power and certainty far removed from our fragile home. Her sharp eyes scanning the scene before landing on me. And everything changed in that instant as her expression froze and her gaze hardened. And she saw me shivering, snow clinging to my hair, my face pale with cold and humiliation, and there was no confusion in her eyes, only understanding and judgment forming instantly. And my father came outside, his confidence shaken, forcing a brittle smile, calling her mom and pretending everything was fine until he noticed she was looking at me, not the house, not him, but me, and for a brief moment no one spoke as snow drifted between us. Then he started explaining quickly, saying I was disrespectful, saying it was a family matter, saying I needed to cool off. And my grandmother repeated the phrase family matter in a calm voice that felt more dangerous than shouting, reminding him that I was his daughter and that it was minus 12 degrees. And when he tried to argue, she interrupted him with calm authority, pointing out that even if I were 10 years old, it would still be unacceptable. And I watched my father look uncertain for the first time in my life, stripped of the dominance he always had. And then she pulled out her phone and made a quiet call asking for a crew to be dispatched. And when my father asked what crew, she simply said demolition. And he laughed nervously and said it was his house. And she corrected him by saying it was the house she paid for. And silence filled the air as reality cracked beneath him. And she walked toward me, her expression softening as she wrapped her arms around me, her coat warm, her voice firm as she told me I was coming with her. And behind us trucks arrived, workers stepped out. My father shouted, my mother cried, and the house that symbolized his control and pride was reduced to rubble. And inside the limo, warmth surrounded me as my frozen fingers throbbed back to life. And I asked her why now, and she told me that tonight she saw the truth. And for years I had questioned my feelings, but now someone had witnessed the reality without distortion. And tears came from years of suppressed pain as I realized respect is not fear, love is not control, and cruelty is never discipline. And that night my father tried to teach me respect by locking me out. But my grandmother taught him a lesson that changed everything forever. And as we drove away, I watched a snow-covered road stretch endlessly ahead, realizing that for the first time in my life I was not walking on eggshells. I was not shrinking myself. I was not begging for love. And I felt something new and powerful rising inside me. Something that felt like freedom. Something that felt like safety. Something that felt like the beginning of a life I had never believed I deserved.